You have a book inside of you screaming to be written, but where do you start? You may be stalled out a little bit. What you have to do is really realize that there are 5 questions that get you started. And these 5 questions seem deceptively simple, but they're not. And the next series of videos, we're going to be kind of going over these 5 questions that you need to be asking yourself as the author. Hi, welcome back to another episode of From Pen to Page. My name is Glenn Gable. I'm an author and a screenwriter, and hopefully my writing tips can help you on your writer's journey. So let's jump into it. Today, it's going to be about this question. Number one, what is your idea? Now, I know a lot of you probably are already thinking, I know what my idea is, but do you really? You see, you really need to kind of boil down your idea to 3 sentences. And I know that might feel weird. You may be thinking, I can't boil it down to 3. No, you really can, because if you can't, then your story is going to be all over the place. You've got to center it on a person, a goal, a conflict. Okay. Some of you might be thinking, well, my story is life is worth living. Okay. That's an idea for a story. The problem is it's too broad. So you have to whittle that down a little bit. You can still have a theme or an idea, a general message that you want to get across in your story, but unless you have a person, a protagonist, some kind of goal that they want, and then some kind of antagonistic force or conflict pushing up against that goal, you're gonna spend a lot of time, wading through it, trying to figure out how best to start. You're not writing a stump speech. You're not writing a sermon, right? You're writing a story. And so getting up on the pulpit and preaching isn't going to be very effective. What's going to be more effective is creating a sympathetic character that the audience really attaches to and follows as they go on this journey of whatever the journey is, right? Whether it's self-discovery or overcoming obstacles or whatever. But you've got to kind of create a sympathetic character that the audience can identify with and then walk along with as they go through this journey. And this journey is your theme. This journey is the idea that life is, don't go too broad is my point. The next one is, let's say you have a story about someone in your life or you. Maybe your grandpa Fred was a spy in World War II. Okay. Or maybe you had a grandma that had an amazing life, or maybe you had an amazing life and all sorts of misadventures and challenges that you had to face. That's fine. That's very good. And that's better than the first problem. But again, you really have to think about how are you going to draw plot points or story points out of that? Okay. Like, for instance, my grandfather was a preacher and he pastored many churches in his day. And people in my family have said, oh, you should make a story about him pastoring all these churches because he's pastored so many churches and blah, 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 blah. And that's fine. They even had titles for it. But the point is that there wasn't really any plot points for me to hang on to create that kind of a story, right? You see, if you're going to use a real person's life, or you're going to create a character that mirrors your life or mirrors somebody in your life, you have to figure out what is the challenges that they face. What is the antagonistic force, the conflict that they're going up against? And you have to show them as real people. You have to show their personality. You can't just say, oh, they were a great person, right? You've got to show their sense of humor. You've got to show what they're afraid of. You've got to show what their strengths are. You've got to kind of boil it down to something that the audience can understand and get behind, right? And you've got to show a change over time, right? And you've got to show, failing and then overcoming the problem, right? And you've got to show personality, right? Make sure that you're balancing, and this is another thing, make sure that you balance whatever truth you're telling with story. So just because it happened doesn't mean it's important to the story. And that's an important thing to understand. Just because it happened in real life doesn't mean it's necessary to tell the story. And the flip side of that is just because it didn't happen, maybe you need to fictionalize something in order to help the character in your story, even though they might be based on a real person, help that character overcome. Understanding and discerning what things you should keep and what you shouldn't is really important if you're basing your story on someone else that actually lived or on yourself. Or maybe, now this is a third, another kind of story is like maybe you have a clear idea of theme. Maybe it's a woman overcoming divorce. All right. Or maybe it's someone, quitting their job and living their best life, or, whatever. Maybe it's a kid that overcomes a bad parenting situation, or maybe becomes the hero of his world, whatever. That's fine. That's good. What makes that unique, though? If you're telling a story of a woman coming out of divorce and surviving and thriving, there's been 1,000 stories like that. So what makes your female character unique? How is that different from all the other ones? Try to think about that. Come up with that. An idea of kind of the 3-sentence pitch for some very famous stories. Let's start off with this one. A boy finds out that he's got top secret information that will save the galaxy from an evil empire. And as he delivers this information to a rebellion, he winds up saving a princess and fighting off the dark leader. Okay. It's not a great sum up for Star Wars, but you get an idea. You have a character, right? You've got a problem, a challenge, and you've got that evil empire, the thing that's trying to stop it. But that's Star Wars. Or what about a small resort town is terrorized by a man-eating shark, and a sheriff who is afraid of the water must team up with a biologist who's very mousy and an old salty sea hand to hunt down the shark before the shark hunts them down. Jaws. Okay. Or a failed writer buys a farm, and when he buys this farm, he finds out that the fields around his farm are haunted by long dead baseball players who want him to build a baseball field. And he has to decide whether to build that field or to sell his farm to avoid bankruptcy. Field of Dreams. Okay. So you get an idea, and maybe my examples were not perfect, but you get the idea that it always comes down to your protagonist. What's their goal, right? And what are they fighting against? If you can do that with your story, if you can come up with kind of like a 3-sentence summary of it, like an elevator pitch, right? Then you're on a very good first step towards writing your story. I hope this has been helpful, at least starting to brainstorm and brain map out the story that's living inside of your head. Next time, we'll talk about question number 2 and the things that you need to do moving forward with that as you continue to write the story. Good luck, and I'll see you next time.